Look at your war cry. Oh, thank you for joining me another episode of Beating Cancer Today, the podcast where hope meets action. I'm your host, Kevin Hennies, a stage 4 colorectal cancer survivor. Against all odds, I defied the doctor's predictions and took my health into my own. Now, I'm here to share my journey and alternative methods that help me. But it's not just about my story. It's about yours too. Join me as we navigate through the challenges of cancer together, providing support, insights, and empowerment. Together, we'll beat cancer, one episode at a time. Let me hear your war cry. Oh, thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of Beating Cancer Today. And all my warriors out there, I am so glad that you guys are staying vigilant and you're still watching these videos and you're sharing them and subscribing them. Subscribing to them. And thank you guys for the traffic that has been on the webpage. Beatingcancertoday.com has been incredible. You guys are watching the videos, you're sharing the information, and I'm just so very humbled by the success and the growth of this page. It's been just such a great message to circulate, and I think it's really saving people's lives. So thank you guys for all the support. And listen, I want to get right to it. I want to get right to it and talk about how I came to the place where I am today. It was August 2019. And I was in the Florida Keys, fishing in Isla Mirada, living my best life. And boy, I'll tell you what, I was about as unhealthy, looking back in retrospect, I was just a turd. I was so unhealthy. And, I was stuck in the daily grind of fishing, and I was fishing all day. I wasn't eating right. I was in the sun. All these things, I was beating myself up. And, just as we normally do when life gets in the way, life is a great distraction. It'll stop making you take care of yourself. And that's what happened to me. And I was so busy that I was neglecting the signs that my body was telling me. My body was giving me signs, and I was neglecting them. I was lightheaded. I was dizzy. But there was always an excuse for it. I was losing weight, and there was an excuse for it. I was pale. I was gray in color. There's excuses for everything. It was dolphin season. I was working back-to-back days. I wasn't eating. that was the reason why I was losing weight. I wasn't taking care of myself. That was why I was discolored, or whatever the case was. There was an excuse for everything because you just don't have time to be sick. Well, I made time to go get blood work done as a promise to one of my family members, and the blood work revealed that I had cancer. And I was diagnosed with stage 4 colorectal cancer. And so I couldn't ignore it anymore. Things just got real. And it was time to make a decision, fight or flight. And at that moment, my wife and I decided that we're going to fight. There is no flight in me anyway. Anybody who knows me and watches these videos knows that I'm a little bit crazy. So there is no flight. It's, you dig in, and we made the decision to dig in. And so I started immediately getting treatment at Moffitt Cancer Center in Tampa, Florida, one of the top 5 cancer hospitals in the country, in the US. So I felt like I was in pretty good hands. I'll just fast forward. I'll fast forward through 3 years of chemotherapy, surgery, radiation, more chemotherapy. And I had lost pretty close to 100 pounds, about 90 something pounds at that time. At the end of 3 years, I still had cancer, less cancer, but I still had cancer. And I had withered away to just a skeleton. I was a bag of bones, a sack of skin, skin and bones. And so at that point, I got to the point where I was going to these doctor's appointments, and it was during the pandemic And every time I went, I could only have one person with me. My older sister, obviously my wife is going to be with me. My older sister is in the medical field. She's a nurse and she understands the lingo. So I wanted to have her on the phone with me during all these meetings. And sometimes I would have different people on the phone with me, depending on what member of my support group was necessary in that moment. But in this time, I had my sister on the phone with me because I was meeting with my oncologist who was going to go over some test results. And that day they told me that if the medicine hadn't been working, if it hadn't worked to this point, it wasn't going to work. And my body had stopped responding to the medicine that I was on. And I'd reached my lifetime max of chemotherapy. My organs were going to start shutting down, and systemically, I couldn't handle it anymore. So they had already eradicated whatever they could through surgery. They eradicated whatever disease was possible to eradicate through surgery. They suppressed it with the radiation and the chemotherapy, but they had no other options now because my body stopped responding. So they sent me home with a social worker and told me to start making arrangements for the end of life, referring me to hospice, actually. So my wife was very upset, obviously, emotional times. And my nurse sister, was still on the phone with me as we walked out of the doctor's office. Emotions were high, tears were flowing. And my sister, who understands the lingo, she was devastated. I was still kind of in shock trying to process it, but she knows what it meant. She knew the finality of it. And so with her emotions, I was sitting in the parking lot at Moffitt. We just walked out of the meeting, and sitting there, we decided to conference in my other sister, we refer to as Disney, because she's always filled with positivity, a little bit of sunshine and rainbows and, bunny rabbits and butterflies, and everything is great when you talk to old Disney. My sister, she's very spiritually centered, and she's one of my spiritual beacons, so to speak, in my support circle. So with the emotions running high, we decided to conference her into this conversation and look for the silver lining if there was one. And so we get on the phone with old Disney, and she starts telling us about, I tell her all about the doctor's appointment and what had just transpired. And my nurse sister translates everything into layperson's terms so she understands it. And so I said, listen, they just sent me home. And they said they have only a couple treatments left, and they're going to save those for the end of life. And that might help me with my level of comfort and quality of life, but it's not going to help anything in the way of disease. So they're going to save a couple treatments left. And outside of that, they weren't going to do anything else. So she says, okay, well, you got this news. What are you going to do about it? And I said, okay, well, this is a little out of character for her to challenge that, but, because she's Disney, so what are you going to do about it? All right, well, she offers a suggestion. She says, she starts talking about this person in her congregation at her church. And I said, oh, great, here we go. Another God talk, right? We're going to get into that. I just got delivered devastating news, and you're going to tell me something about a church, some conversation about that. Listen, I'm looking for a magic bullet here. She says, Kevin, listen, just wait. Let me finish the story. There's a guy at church. It's relevant. It's relevant to your situation. He had the same cancer as you. He got diagnosed at the same time as you, and he opted out of Western medicine. You see, his wife is actually a veterinarian from South America. And he couldn't handle the Western medicine. It was torturous for him. So he opted out. And she started him on this repurposed medicine and didn't really have much information on it, just said it was a repurposed medicine. And that was it. But she vaguely described something. It was something veterinarian. It was, I'm not really sure exactly how she described it at the time, but it seemed like the lunacy behind it was insane. And it just, well, it was typical of old Disney to suggest such a ridiculous thing out of left field. But she described it as being a horse medication for parasites. And boy, at that time, my nurse sister and I, woo, we laughed and laughed. Oh, we had such a time with that. Boy, old Disney, she really did lighten up the mood. Boy, we laughed at her like it was incredible. Man, thank God we called her. She really did brighten up our spirits with the comedy that this guy started taking horse medicine and that was the remedy. Oh, you're insane. You're absolutely insane. Well, we get off the phone with her. And as I continue driving home, my fate has already been determined. I have a meeting with the social worker for hospice the next day. I'm getting closer to home. And as the miles tick by, my reality has not changed. The narrative has been written and my fate has been determined. I'm going to hospice. They said at that point in time, I had a few weeks before my quality of life was going to spiral. And I was going to start suffering. And that's when they were going to introduce those other remaining treatments. So I didn't have much time to play around with this. And as the miles continued to tick and I got closer to home, closer to the reality that had already been written, I called my sister back, old Disney, because some of what she was saying didn't seem so ridiculous anymore as the reality of it set in. So I call Disney back and I say, you got that guy's phone number? So she gives me the guy's phone number. I call him up and I end up connecting with him and I'll just fast forward through the story. He tells me all about it and I don't really get much out of him other than the basis of it. And it sent me down a rabbit hole that night. As soon as I get home, I go onto Google. I start Googling everything on the internet and I'm down a rabbit hole. I'm up all night. Watching this and I can't believe the information that I'm getting out of it, but I really don't know what's true and what's not true. At that point in time in the world, we just didn't know what to believe. Pandemics were happening. Things were going crazy. So I didn't know what to believe. So I kind of took it with a grain of salt. But then the next morning, I have a meeting with a construction person because I'm in the middle of building a house, trying to leave my wife with something for when I die. We're building a house and I'm scrambling to try to finish this house because I don't want to leave her with a construction site, which appears to be imminent. I don't have much time left. So I need to finish this construction site so I can leave her with a nice house when I die. I don't have any life insurance. What was I going to do? We're starting to make end-of-life plans, funeral arrangements, picking out the clothes that I'm going to wear for my last viewing. Folks, shit got real. So the next morning, I have this meeting with the person for this construction, and I start driving to this meeting. Unseasonably heavy traffic for the area that I live in. It's kind of crazy. But I see up ahead there's an intersection and there's a car carrier loading up cars, blocking a whole lane of traffic. And it's pushing everybody over to the left. Everybody has to go into a left-hand lane to make a detour around this ridiculously parked, ridiculously positioned car carrier semi-truck. Kind of ridiculous. Now I'm getting irritated because I was up all night. I'm in this unseasonably ridiculous traffic, and I only got to go a couple blocks to get to this construction site. So I'm pressed for time, and I get pushed over into this detoured left-hand turn lane. The only way I can get back on track is by making a U-turn into a parking lot which, coincidentally, I know the guy who owns it. And I haven't talked to this guy in like a decade, right? So I figured, listen, I don't want any problems. I don't have much time left to live. So I'll just stop in, poke my head in, say hi, say, hey, I'm just passing through, using your parking lot to make a U-turn. Have a nice life. And that would be the end of it. So I do. I stop there, poke my head in his office, and I said, hey, bud, just wanted to check in with you. I haven't seen you in a long time. I'm just stopping by to say hi, and didn't want to interrupt your day. Just have a nice day. And when I did that, he says, Kevin, come on in. You're stopping by to say hi. Well, shit, looks like you're stopping by to say goodbye. You look terrible. You look absolutely terrible. And I said, whoa, well, okay, I'll throw one back at you. I don't know if you heard, but I have stage 4 cancer and I just got sent home to die. That'll fix him. Well, he says, oh no, I heard. What are you going to do about it? You just going to lay down? I said, well, you don't understand. They sent me home. There's nothing left to do. He says, yeah, that's bull. He says, you're just going to lay down? He's like, this isn't the Kevin that I know. The Kevin that I know was a fighter. The Kevin that I know had a chip on his shoulder. There was nobody better. The guy that's standing in front of me right now looks defeated. If you already gave up, then you already gave up. He said, but let me tell you a story. So he tells me this story. He says, about 8 months ago, a friend of his got diagnosed with esophageal cancer. He finds himself at a Tractor Supply. And the Tractor Supply, this was during the time of pandemic, and everybody's talking about this repurposed medicine, ivermectin stuff. I think Joe Rogan and President Trump, I mean, all these people are doing these alternative medicines. There's a lot of controversy in it. And, this guy that I stopped, to say hi to, he's one of those guys. He's one of those controversial guys. He heard about his friend getting diagnosed with esophageal cancer. He finds himself there on other business at Tractor Supply. And he's at Tractor Supply on other business. His friend gets diagnosed. And he just so happens that while they're loading up something in his truck, he's leaning against the end cap in Tractor Supply in the aisle, the end cap that is on display, ivermectin and fenbendazole, anti-parasitic horse medicine. Great marketing, I guess, for the times, right? Because it was during the pandemic. So he gets one of these just for his buddy. He buys one of these, and on his way home, his friend calls him and says, hey, great news, I was misdiagnosed. And so obviously his friend doesn't need it anymore. He gets back to his office, throws it in the top right-hand drawer of his desk, and he never thinks about it again. So over the next 8 months, he's fumbling around with this big old box of horse paste, right, from Tractor Supply. And he keeps saying, geez, I got to get rid of this thing. I got to get rid of this thing. And something in the back of his head over 8 months of time says, don't get rid of it. And something's telling him, don't get rid of this. Every time he goes to get rid of it, he doesn't get rid of it. And 8 months goes by. Lo and behold, I walk into his office looking like a sack of sadness, right? And I walk into his office. He's fumbling around with it. He says, Kevin, every time I go to get rid of this thing, something in the back of my head says, don't get rid of it. He takes it out of his desk drawer and he hands it to me. And he says, Kevin, I've been waiting for you. I've had this in my desk drawer for 8 months. I've been waiting for you. That's why I've held on to it. I didn't know it. but you should take this. So I take it out of his hand. I say thank you, and I go home. And I actually, I don't go home. I sit in the parking lot for a second, actually, and I review the series of events that just occurred and what had to happen in order to put me in his parking lot. In order for that to happen, so many events had to be a coincidence. So I can't explain it. I don't know why, but at that moment in time, I felt touched. I felt like I was in the right place at the right time. And something shifted in my thought process. And I said, I went down this big deep dive the night before. I didn't get any sleep. It was all fenbendazole, ivermectin, fenbendazole. And I still didn't really understand any of it. It was a lot of $10 words. It was a lot of vocabulary I didn't get. I'm not a big science guy. I don't understand a lot of it. But then the series of coincidences that happened that led me to this guy's office, and coincidentally, he just so happened to have this in his hand and handed it to me. I couldn't deny that. I'm not a big religious guy. I'm not a big Bible thumper here. But I could only explain this series of coincidences as the possibility this could be God's plan. Anybody who's watching this video has probably been in a position of desperation to the point where they're grasping at straws. And if you were once religious and then stopped being religious, usually when you get sick, you find that religion again. And I may have strayed from my relationship with God for quite some time up until that point. But in that moment, I feel like I found it again. I sat in that parking lot, and all I could do, there was no other plan. I didn't turn the key on the car. I didn't start the engine. I immediately closed my eyes and bowed my head in prayer. I didn't understand how I got to that point. It was 9:00 in the morning. And this fenbendazole had just been thrust into my life physically. Now I had a tangible thing to hold. He handed me a tube of paste from Tractor Supply. So I had it in my now. The decision had to be made. I immediately went home. I canceled my construction meeting. I immediately went home and I started taking that fenbendazole that morning. And I didn't understand the science. I didn't take the fenbendazole based on science. And I want everybody to understand that I am not that bright. I am not I'm not a scholar. I'm not a scholar. I'm not a very educated man. But I'm a hell of an investigator. And the information is present. All the information is there on the internet. And I just was lucky enough to come across the publications, the scientific supporting evidence that shows that there is potential in repurposed medicine. So I came across the publications while I was doing this deep dive. I started taking the fenbendazole blindly, just based on very, very little information that I did the night before. Folks, I started taking this fenbendazole based on my faith in God's plan. I felt like this is a part of God's plan. I started taking this, the series of events that took place could be described to me as no other than God's plan. That's the only thing that made sense to me. And I'm not a religious guy, but that was the only thing that I could attribute this series of events to. So I started taking it based on my faith in God. Thank God, just to my benefit, the science just so happened to turn out to support it. Oh my God. The science was overwhelmingly supportive. And at that point in time, I knew that God's plan, this was absolutely what had to happen. So I dug in. I started taking this medicine, and it was just the fenbendazole. At first, I just started taking the fenbendazole, and I changed nothing else. Well, then I started thinking differently. As I took the fenbendazole in those first couple days, I reflected back on strategically how I'm addressing things. And I reflected back on my upbringing. I was in the United States Marine Corps, and I went to boot camp in Parris Island, South Carolina. And when I got to Parris Island, the first thing that they did to me in the Marine Corps was they shaved my head and they stripped me of my identity. And when they stripped me of my identity, once they had a clean, blank canvas, that was what they used to build the warrior that I became. That was the blank canvas. After they stripped me down of all my bad habits, all my identity, all who I thought I was, they stripped that down to just a blank slate, and they built a warrior. So I approached this battle in the same manner. I had blindly followed Western medicine to this point, and it didn't work. My doctors were great. Everybody was great. I've met some great people, but I was where I was. This is where I got to. Nothing worked. So I don't vilify anybody. I just changed the narrative so I could control the outcome. And the narrative was that what I did up to this point didn't work. So I had to change something, right? So I stripped it down. I shaved everything. You know, I already didn't have hair from the chemo, so I didn't have to shave my head. But I stripped down anything that I knew to be normal. I started a fast. I eliminated the garbage out of my diet. And it wasn't really so much what I changed to eating. It was what I eliminated eating. That was the trick. I didn't go on this diet. I just cut out the crap that was killing me. I was digging a grave with a spoon. The toxic stuff that I was consuming was crazy. So the first thing I did was I started a fast. I went on a 3-day fast. I stripped it all down to a blank canvas. And then I went completely ketogenic with my food intake. No more sugars, no alcohol, no bag food, no box food, no drive-thrus, no processed foods, no starches, carbohydrates, none of that stuff. I cut it all out, and I tried to get as close to single ingredient foods that I could. I tried to revert my life back to biblical times. What did Jesus eat? I can guarantee you the bread that was broken at the Last Supper was not the same quality of bread that we buy in the market today. I can tell you that for sure. Wine, same thing. Same thing for the wine. But I digress. I did strip everything down. I went ketogenic, and I started seeing a day-to-day difference in how things felt by doing that. All along the time, in the background, the fenbendazole already started its job. So now I'm on the fenbendazole, and I switch over to ketogenic. I remove myself from the environment of toxicity that I was in. So I change my environment. I eliminate the toxic things that I'm consuming, and everything's different. We have a new ball game, folks. I'm taking fenbendazole. I changed 2 major things in my life, and now we have a new game. We have a new game. I'm starting to now piece together days and one day at a time that I'm winning each day. And with each day that I win, now after a week, 2 weeks, my energy is different. The energy shifts. And I start to be able to harness this energy where I can capitalize on it. Now I'm starting to take showers. I don't need assistance getting to the bathroom. Things like I'm starting to actually develop a little bit of self-pride. I'm not so vulnerable anymore. Now I'm starting to actually be able to brush my own teeth, take care of my own self. And I'm starting to kind of feel really good about it because this was not the direction that I was headed. And so during this time, now we're still in the first couple of weeks of things. I'm doing research. I'm staying vigilant this whole time. I'm still down this deep rabbit hole. And I'm finding all sorts of things with clinical evidence that show positive trending that things do work. Alternative things do work in combating cancer, combating disease, all sorts of disease. And I'm overwhelmed with the provable results that I'm finding, the publications, the clinical trials, the Western medicine evidence that these things work. And I'm baffled as to why nobody tried these things on me. And yet, through the same doctors, through the same system, they're doing these clinical trials. They show that they're working. The medicine that they're using is working, but nobody tried them on me. Come to find out, they defunded and discontinued those trials. Well, I'm not a very educated man, but I am a very great investigator. I was able to find the publications. I was able to find all the clinical evidence that they published that referred to these repurposed medications. And I started collecting these things for the disease that I had. Anything that showed a promise for colorectal disease, I paid attention to. And then it kind of grew broader that these medications weren't only good for specific cancers, they were good for all cancers. And at first, I used to think that this cancer was a parasitic thing, and that's why the fenbendazole was so effective. But come to find out, I don't think that's accurate at all. I think that the disease is metabolized. The disease's diet, it feeds on the same things that parasites feed on. And the anti-parasitic medication interrupts the metabolism. It interrupts the dietary requirements of the parasites. And that's why the parasites starve and go away and they die off. Well, in the same way, that's how cancer thrives. Cancer feeds the same way that parasites feed, on the same things that parasites feed on. So this anti-parasitic medicine interrupts the ability of your disease to metabolize and energize and grow. It cannot happen. Now, in chemotherapy suppresses the disease, but it doesn't starve the disease. It just kicks it down. It doesn't eliminate it. It beats it to the ground, but it doesn't kill it. The fenbendazole, that pulls the weeds out from the roots. That kills it. It starves it. Without food, it can't grow. It can't thrive. It can't exist. That's the metabolic approach of fighting disease. So I found some supporting ingredients they added to this protocol of mine, a fenbendazole-based protocol. I added the ingredients that I found to support the fenbendazole. And I only added the ingredients that I found clinical trials, clinical evidence, and a survivor's testimony. It was a three-tier process of validation that before I introduced any new item into this protocol, I had to verify it both clinically, medically, and through testimony. So I felt like it was vetted, right? Before I recklessly introduced anything. So I added some ingredients. I kept it kind of, there's a lot of things that work, folks. There's a lot of things that work. I couldn't be the man that jumped on the horse and rode off into every different direction. I couldn't be that guy. I wouldn't be disciplined enough to keep up with it all. So I had to narrow it down to just a few ingredients, or else I'd get so confused that I wouldn't follow through. So, all right, well, let's go over the ingredients of my cocktail. We'll start off with the star of the show, fenbendazole, the anti-parasitic drug that's for equestrian use and for cattle. The theory behind the fenbendazole, the potential to affect diseases beyond its traditional use, involves several proposed mechanisms. So, microtubule disruption, that's one of the things that it does. Fenbendazole, it's believed to work by disrupting the formation and function of microtubules, which those are essential for components of the cytoskeleton cell in cells. The microtubules are involved in cell division, and interfering with their function can inhibit the proliferation of rapidly dividing cells, such as cancer cells. This mechanism is somewhat similar to the action of certain chemotherapy drugs, like I don't know, some of the things that you might find to be a little intrusive. Alteration of cellular transport. That's another thing that the fenbendazole does. It alters the way the cells are transported. By affecting the microtubules, fenbendazole may also impact the intracellular transporting process. This disruption could lead to the impaired cell function and induce apoptosis, the programmed cell death that we talked about in previous episodes. So the immune system modulation, that's also another thing that pops out that is effective in taking fenbendazole. There's some evidence suggesting that the fenbendazole might modulate the immune system, enhancing the body's ability to target and destroy cancer cells. This is still a topic of ongoing research, but it certainly is present in the studies today. Potential anti-inflammatory effects. The fenbendazole might have some anti-inflammatory properties which could contribute to its effect on disease. Inflammation plays a role in various diseases, including cancer. So reducing the inflammation might have a beneficial impact for sure. Now, for active diseases, I have a very aggressive 1,000 milligrams 3 times a day is how much fenbendazole I took for active disease. Now I don't have active disease. I'm only on a maintenance protocol. So I'm taking 1,000 milligrams spread out over 3 times a day. But for active disease, I took 1,000 milligrams in the morning, 1,000 milligrams at dinner time, and 1,000 milligrams at bedtime. I didn't stray from that. You can set your watch by it. That was the star of the show for my protocol. The next ingredient that I put up there is cimetidine. Cimetidine is the active ingredient in Tagamet, which some people might know as a name brand. The potential anti-cancer effects for cimetidine far outweigh any benefit that other antihistamines have, right? So for cimetidine, the immune system modulation, which is another connection to the fenbendazole, similar, right? Cimetidine has been found to have immunomodulatory effects. And that's just a big word for it saying that it affects the immune system, right? That it extends beyond its role in acid suppression. It's an acid suppressor, but cimetidine or Tagamet, it's an acid suppressor, but its role goes way beyond that. The ability to target cancer cells, for instance, it may enhance the immune system's ability to target those cancer cells. This effect is thought to be due to the inhibition of tumor-induced immunosuppression. Some cancers can suppress the body's immune response, allowing them to grow unchecked. So your radical cells will just grow everywhere. Cimonidine may help counteract this suppression, making the immune system more effective at attacking tumor cells. Increased T cell activity. That's another thing. Cimonidine may increase the active T cells, which are crucial for identifying and destroying cancer cells. The interaction growth factors, that's something to really kind of focus in on. The interaction with the growth factors, there's some evidence that suggesting that cimonidine, it suggests that cimonidine might affect the growth factors involved in tumor growth, if that makes any sense. The formation of new blood vessels that tumors need to grow. So it affects that. This is still an area of ongoing research, but the point being is that the benefits beyond acid reduction is incredible. Another thing that it does is an inhibition of metastasis. This is a huge thing, huge power player in the cancer battle. Research has shown that cimonidine might inhibit metastasis, the spread of cancer to other parts of the body. Hello? This was actually a clinical trial in 1986, I think, at MD Anderson, which is the #1 cancer hospital in the country, in the US right now. So in 1986, they discovered that this potentially could stop metastasis. I mean, potentially by affecting the cellular adhesion molecules or other factors involved in the metastasis process, metastatic process. It's a game changer, folks. Why this wouldn't be used on a regular basis is beyond me. But let's even go past that. The gastrointestinal protection that it provides. The prevention of stress ulcers, especially during this battle. In critically ill patients, cimonidine is sometimes used to prevent stress-induced disease, which is a condition where the stomach lining can be damaged due to severe stress or illness. I don't know of really any other illness that creates more stress than cancer. I mean, in more than one way. So yeah, cimonidine is a huge power player, right? And that I use 600 milligrams twice a day, 3 pills in the morning and 3 pills at night. I get that at Walmart.com. And the fenbendazole I get at tractorsupply.com. Listen, folks, I didn't reinvent the wheel. I'm not that bright. I didn't make any of this stuff up. All this stuff is proven through Western medicine. I'm just presenting it. Why people don't use this is why Western medicine doesn't use this. It's puzzling. But another ingredient that I added also, immune mushroom blend. It may combat cancer through a combination of immune system enhancement, direct anti-tumor effects. The support for overall health and reduction of side effects is incredible. Why? Everybody should take immune mushroom blend. I take the brand that I take. I only take 1 pill a day because it's got each pill has it's an extract. It has 2,500 milligrams of dry mushrooms in it. So I only take 1 a day. It's the Gaia name brand, immune mushroom blend. So it supports effective immune response and the body's immune defenses. It's a fruiting body extract with beta glucans. So that's why I take that name brand to Gaia. So that's like the most reliable and trustworthy product I found, I think, through my research. Another one that I take is curcumin. Everybody who has cancer probably has come across curcumin or they're familiar with it in some way because there's a lot of research out there. Curcumin holds a potential as an anti-cancer agent due to its anti-inflammatory, antioxidants. I'm sorry, antioxidants and apoptopic, apoptop, apoptopic, atop, apoptosis effect. The properties that the cancer destroying itself is what that means, as well as its ability to modulate multiple signaling pathways involving cancer. You hear about these pathways all the time, the delivery methods and stuff like that of different medications and how it reaches and affects the disease. Curcumin streamlines that also. So, however, it's still under investigation and more research is needed. But to fully understand its benefits, you really should look into it. The curcumin, I take 400 milligrams 3 times a day, and I can set my watch by it. I can tell you that. Annatto is actually another thing that I added to the protocol. The annatto is the actual only good part of the vitamin E that most of us are so deficient in. And particularly its active component, it holds promise in cancer prevention. Its active component is a Bixin, Bixin. It holds promise in cancer prevention, and it supports, the support is due to its antioxidant and anti-inflammatory properties. Most of these ingredients, all of these ingredients, are antioxidants, and you'll see inflammation as a huge issue in disease. However, while these studies are promising, they're still doing more research on it, but a lot of these studies have already been published through Western medicine. Annatto is, I take that 300 milligrams 3 times a day, but moving on to another ingredient that I find is also a huge power player is berberine. Berberine has shown potential in combating cancer through its ability to inhibit cancer cell proliferation. It induces apoptosis, the cellular destruction. It's a suicide mission. It prevents metastasis, so it doesn't spread. And berberine, it enhances the effectiveness of conventional treatments as well. So, this isn't an either or. I'm not advising anybody to choose between Western medicine and this protocol. You could take it together if you want. One complements the other for sure. Maybe taking this protocol is less time that you'll be exposed to the toxicity of Western medicine. So berberine is a big one, man. Berberine, I take 1 500 milligram pill twice a day. It blocks all the pathways for cancer. And it's a power player. Serapeptase. Serapeptase is another ingredient that I added. It has potential benefits related to its anti-inflammatory and tissue modifying properties, which may indirectly support cancer management by reducing inflammation and fibrosis. I mean, these are things that are proven to be effective. These aren't just, I didn't just willy-nilly just think of some of these ingredients. I can't even spell half of them, but they've been proven to be effective. And I have a 3-tier process: clinical evidence, clinical research, and in the survivor testimony. It's a 3-tier process of validation. The serapeptase, I would take that twice a day. Make sure you take it before, at least an hour before you eat anything, because it's gonna have the best effects. You don't want it to be a dietary enzyme. You want to be able to control how it's delivered. So you want to take it about an hour before you eat any food. The serapeptase, that'll get rid of the fibrosis and the soft tissue aches and stuff like that also. So it's a good one. Magnesium plays a supportive role in cancer management through its involvement in DNA repair. Magnesium, that's a big deal too. I think everybody in the world is probably deficient in magnesium in one way or the other. There's so many different kinds of magnesiums. So I take a magnesium complex, so it has more than one type in it. It may also reduce or help mitigate some of the side effects of cancer treatment. And it's also beneficial in assisting for absorption of the D3 and K2 for low magnesium. And it can both inhibit the tumor growth and promote metastasis. Uh, it could inhibit the tumor growth and prevent metastasis. In labor test, mice with low magnesium levels were more likely to develop cancer and have a faster cancer spread. So the magnesium complex, I only take that one pill a day, but I take it with the D3 and K2. So it helps absorb it. And the D3, K2, that's the other ingredient that I wanted to talk about. I take 7,000 IUs daily of that. That's a huge, I think everybody's deficient in vitamin D. So another ingredient that I want to talk to you about, I recently added this, the DMSO. DMSO has a $25 word attached to it that I can't pronounce. So we'll just call it DMSO, and you could just Google that, and that'll pop right up. It's a common acronym for the drug. A DMSO, you can get that on Amazon. It has several potential benefits in cancer treatment, including direct cytotoxic effects on cancer cells, enhancement of drug delivery, and anti-inflammatory and antioxidant properties. Folks, you'll see a common trend, antioxidant and anti-inflammatory properties for all these things. The pharmaceutical DMSO, I take 1 tablespoon every day. I dilute it, 1 teaspoon every day. I dilute it in a glass or ceramic bowl, with spring water or purified water, 100 milliliters. It aids in the absorption of all the supplements directly into the bloodstream. It'll help everything get into your bloodstream. Cuts through protein shell of cancer cells. It also decreases their energy levels. Very potent anti-inflammatory, especially cerebral. I would also consider adding ivermectin. Ivermectin, I would pulse that. I would alternate or stagger the ivermectin and fenbendazole. I would take fenbendazole in the morning, ivermectin at lunch, fenbendazole again at dinner, ivermectin 2 hours after that, and then 2 hours before you go to bed, take fenbendazole again. And I would dose it appropriately as recommended. But I would hit it. Folks, this is a shock and awe process. A shock and awe process that's going to bring you straight to the cusp of health. This is going to be a life-changing event for you because up until this point, you haven't been able to witness positive trending. You haven't been able to feel the effects of something that worked. And this is something that's probably going to be a little bit more immediately noticed. It took me 6 weeks and I was already 50% less disease. At 14 weeks, I was no evidence of disease. 14 weeks from the day that I started this protocol, no evidence of disease. And in just half that time, less than half that time, I was 50% less disease. So folks, this is definitely something that's worth committing to. I make no money. I would never monetize cancer, nor do I allow any monetary exchange through my sites or pages on social media. Everything I get is on Amazon or a big box store in the US, tractorsupply.com, walmart.com. I have nothing to gain here, folks, and you have nothing to lose here. Everything is supported with scientific evidence, zero known toxicity, No conflict with Western medicines that you might be taking. This isn't an either or. This isn't an ultimatum. You could do it all at the same time. I mean, conversely, taking chemotherapy in conjunction with taking this protocol may even expose you less to the side effects of chemotherapy. In South America and in a lot of Europe, the population participates in an anti-parasitic cleanse twice a year, just as a matter of hygiene. This is not taboo, folks. This is not a taboo thing. They do it all over the world, just not in the US. So you could decipher the rhyme or reason behind that on your own. But the point that I'm making is nobody's going to look at you sideways for being your own advocate. And you don't have to ask permission from anybody to stay alive. What got you here has not been working. So you need to do something to change the narrative so you can control the outcome. Folks, please like these videos, subscribe to them, and share this message with anyone that'll listen. We need to grow this audience so we can start saving some lives. Please, folks, stay vigilant, be a warrior. Until next time.